There are moments in life that shake us to our core, moments that arrive unannounced, changing everything we thought we knew. For Caitlin Clark, a winter morning in the Montana wilderness would become one of those moments. She came here to escape, to heal from the weight of expectations, the exhaustion of a life lived under the spotlight. But fate had other plans. It came not in words, not in a familiar voice, but in the gentle, deliberate knock of a black bear at her window. First, she thought it was the wind. Then she saw it, massive, powerful, yet oddly peaceful. A creature of the wild, standing at the threshold of her solitude. What did it want? Why did it come? And why, against all logic, did she feel drawn to it? What started as curiosity would turn into something deeper, a connection that defied reason, a bond that would challenge the very boundaries between human and nature. But when trust is built where it never should be, choices must be made. Would Caitlin hold on to what she found, or let it go for the sake of something greater? This is a story of trust, resilience, and the quiet power of letting go. If you believe in the magic of the unexpected, the beauty of wild connections, and the lessons that nature teaches us, don't miss this story. Drop a comment if you've ever had an unforgettable encounter with nature. Now, let's begin. Inside the cabin, Caitlin sits curled up in an old wooden chair, a book resting in her lap. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Outside, the world is still, wrapped in winter's quiet embrace. The wind hums through the trees, a distant and familiar sound. She takes a deep breath, inhaling the scent of burning wood. It is just another silent night, or so she thinks. A sudden noise breaks the stillness. A knock, soft, deliberate. Caitlin freezes, her breath catching in her throat. She listens, heart pounding. Another knock, not the erratic thud of a branch against the glass, not the shifting of the wind. It is steady, intentional, like a visitor announcing their arrival. But who could it be? There is no one for miles, no one except her, and whatever waits outside. Slowly, she rises to her feet, her pulse quickening. She glances at the door, then at the large window beside it. The curtains are only partially drawn. Beyond the glass, under the pale moonlight, she sees something that makes her breath hitch in her throat. Two dark eyes stare back at her, massive, deep, unblinking. A bear, a black bear standing on its hind legs, its large paws pressed gently against the glass. Fear floods her veins, instinct screaming at her to retreat. Her mind races. Bears don't just knock on windows. They don't come this close unless they are desperate. And yet, this one isn't growling. It isn't clawing or baring its teeth. It just stands there watching her, waiting for something. But what? Caitlin swallows hard, torn between terror and an odd sense of calm. Somehow, she knows this moment is important. Her grandfather's words echo in her mind, a land of second chances. But what does this mean now? With a bear staring at her through the window, she takes a slow step forward, her bare feet pressing against the wooden floor. The bear doesn't move. It simply lowers itself onto all fours, exhaling a slow, heavy breath that fogs up the glass. The sight is strangely human, almost gentle. Her fingers tremble as she reaches for the curtain but stops herself. Something about this moment feels sacred. A dozen thoughts rush through her mind. Should she make a noise? Try to scare it away? Call for help? Not that there's anyone to hear her. But something deep inside tells her to wait. To see. The bear shifts slightly, pressing its nose against the window frame. A soft, muffled thump as it paws at the wood. Caitlin exhales shakily, watching. There is no aggression in its movements. No desperation. Only curiosity. Perhaps even recognition. But that's impossible, isn't it? Time stretches between them, the silence thick with unspoken understanding. Caitlin doesn't know why, but she feels something stir inside her, an invisible thread pulling her toward this creature. She takes another step, slowly lowering herself into the chair near the window. Her heart still pounds, but not from fear anymore. She presses her palm lightly against the glass. The bear watches her, then lets out a low, rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. And then, just as quietly as it came, it lowers its head and turns away. Caitlin remains frozen, watching as the massive figure lumbers toward the tree line. The snow crunches beneath its weight, its dark form blending into the shadows of the forest. And then, it is gone. The night is silent again. The fire crackles, the wind whispers, but Caitlin knows something has changed. She lets out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her chest. Her pulse is still racing. What just happened? What did she just feel? She spends the rest of the night awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled. Was it a dream? A trick of her lonely mind? But when the morning light filters through the window, the truth is waiting for her. There in the fresh snow outside her cabin are paw prints leading up to her porch. Large, undeniable, real. Caitlin shivers as she stares at them, her breath visible in the cold morning air. Last night wasn't a dream. The bear was here, and somehow, it had been knocking all day. She feels its presence lingering, not in a physical sense, but in her thoughts, in the way she keeps glancing toward the woods. Her grandfather had spoken of moments like this, moments where nature reaches out, where the wild and the human world blur for just a heartbeat. But this was different. This was personal. She pulls her coat tighter around herself, stepping off the porch. The tracks disappear into the trees, swallowed by the endless expanse of wilderness. She wonders if the bear is still out there, watching, waiting. That evening, she hesitates before closing the curtains. A part of her wants to leave them open. A part of her wants to see if the bear will return. But what if it does? What then? What does it want? More importantly, what does she want? She doesn't know the answer. Not yet. But as she curls up in bed, the memory of those dark, knowing eyes follows her into sleep, and deep in the forest, hidden beneath the towering pines, the bear lingers, waiting, watching, knowing that this is only the beginning. Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that the bear would return. Every morning, she found herself scanning the tree line, searching for a dark shape between the pines. She told herself it was foolish, wild animals didn't form habits like humans did. But something inside her, something deeper than logic, told her this was different. The bear hadn't just wandered past her cabin. It had come with purpose, and that purpose still lingered in the cold Montana air. Days passed, and the snow fell in soft, steady waves, blanketing the land in a quiet stillness. Caitlin tried to focus on her routine, splitting wood, boiling coffee, flipping through her grandfather's old journals, but her mind kept drifting back to that night. The way the bear had knocked, the way it had looked at her, like it was searching for something. The thought both unsettled and intrigued her. What had it been trying to say? Then, on the fifth night, she heard it again. A soft, muffled knock against the glass. Her breath hitched, her body going still. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it, her mind playing tricks on her in the loneliness of the cabin. But then it came again, gentle, rhythmic, deliberate. Caitlin rose slowly from her chair, heart pounding. She turned toward the window, barely breathing. And there, just as before, stood the bear. It was closer this time, its massive head level with the window, its dark eyes peering inside. The moonlight illuminated its thick fur, casting silver streaks across its broad shoulders. Caitlin's fear had dulled since their first encounter, replaced by something quieter, something that felt almost familiar. She wasn't afraid. She was in awe. Slowly, she stepped toward the glass, watching as the bear lifted one massive paw and pressed it lightly against the frame. She didn't know why, but she pressed her hand against the other side, her fingers just inches from the creature's. The cold from the glass seeped into her skin, but she barely noticed. The bear huffed, its warm breath fogging up the window. For a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if they were suspended in time, trapped in some unspoken understanding that defied logic. Caitlin swallowed hard, her heart thudding against her ribs. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the bear turned. It lowered itself onto all fours, gave her one last lingering look, and lumbered back toward the woods. The snow swallowed the sound of its steps, and soon it was gone. Caitlin exhaled, unaware she had been holding her breath. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where the bear had stood, her fingers still resting lightly against the cold glass. The next morning, she found its tracks again, fresh in the snow, leading right up to her porch. But this time, they didn't vanish into the distance. They circled her cabin as if the bear had been pacing, waiting for her. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but not from fear. This was no ordinary encounter. This was something else. She just didn't know what yet. For the rest of the day, she felt restless, unable to shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something important. Every sound outside made her pulse quicken. Every shadow between the trees caught her eye. She had never believed in fate or signs before, but this was different. The bear kept coming back, and whether she wanted to admit it or not, a part of her was waiting for it now too. That evening, as the fire crackled softly beside her, she did something she hadn't done before. Instead of shutting the curtains, she left them open. Instead of hiding behind the walls of her cabin, she stepped outside onto the porch. The cold air wrapped around her, biting at her cheeks, but she didn't retreat. She stood there, staring into the darkened woods, her breath curling in the icy air. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing moved. The forest remained quiet. Just as she was about to turn back inside, a sound broke the silence, a slow, deliberate crunch of snow. Caitlin's heart leapt into her throat. She turned, eyes scanning the darkness, and then, there it was. A massive, hulking shape emerging from the trees. The bear. It had come back. It stopped a few yards away, its dark eyes locked onto hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Caitlin felt her pulse thrumming in her ears, but she wasn't scared. She felt something else entirely. Connection, understanding, as if the bear had been waiting for her just as much as she had been waiting for it. Carefully, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an apple. Hesitating before placing it gently on the porch railing, the bear sniffed the air, its ears twitching. It took a cautious step forward, then another. Caitlin held her breath, watching as it reached the railing, its powerful jaws parting as it delicately took the apple in its mouth. A soft crunch filled the air as it bit down, juice dripping from its muzzle. Caitlin exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and wonder flooding through her. She had done something unthinkable. She had shared a moment with a wild creature. The bear finished its meal and licked its nose, staring at her once more. Then, with a low, rumbling exhale, it turned and retreated into the night. Caitlin watched it go, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had just crossed an invisible line, one she could never step back from. The bear had come to her not out of hunger, not out of desperation, but out of something else, something deeper. And for the first time in a long, long while, Caitlin felt alive. As she stepped back inside, her hands trembling slightly, she knew this wasn't the end. The bear would return, and when it did, she would be ready. The tracks in the snow remained, circling her cabin like a quiet reminder that she was not alone. The thought should have unsettled her, but instead, it filled her with an odd sense of comfort. How many nights had she spent feeling isolated, lost in her own mind? And now, here was someone who kept coming back. Whether she understood it or not, the bear had chosen to return, and she had chosen to wait. That evening, the knock came again. Gentle, steady. Caitlin's pulse quickened, but this time she was ready. She set her mug down, her breath hitching as she turned toward the window. The bear stood there, its massive form bathed in silver moonlight. Its dark eyes reflected something deep, something almost human. It wasn't just a wild animal searching for food. It was waiting for her, just as she had been waiting for it. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping toward the door. Her fingers hovered over the handle. Every instinct screamed at her to stay inside, to respect the barrier between them. But something deeper, something unexplainable urged her forward. Slowly, she cracked the door open, just enough for the icy air to rush in. The bear exhaled, a warm breath curling in the cold. Its head tilted slightly, ears twitching. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Caitlin's heart pounded, her body tense, but not with fear. It was something else. A quiet awe, a deep, unshakable understanding. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything. But what words could possibly capture the moment? So instead, she simply stood there, the door open, her presence an unspoken invitation. The bear stepped forward, its massive paws pressing into the snow. It was so close now that she could see each strand of thick fur, the way its breath turned to mist in the freezing air. Her hand trembled on the doorframe, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she knelt slowly, lowering herself to its level, showing it that she was not a threat. The bear watched her, its gaze steady, as if deciding something. Then, to her amazement, it exhaled a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something softer, something almost like recognition. Caitlin's throat tightened. She had spent so long feeling disconnected from the world, from herself. But in that moment, kneeling before a creature that should have feared her, she felt seen. The bear was not afraid. It was not threatening. It was simply there. And so was she. She reached into her pocket and pulled out another apple, her fingers shaking slightly as she placed it gently on the porch. The bear sniffed the air, stepping forward with careful movements. Its black nose twitched as it leaned down, picking up the fruit with surprising gentleness. The soft crunch of its jaws filled the quiet space between them. Caitlin exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and wonder swelling in her chest. For the first time in months, maybe years, she wasn't thinking about the past. She wasn't replaying old regrets or drowning in the weight of expectations. She was simply here, present, connected to something larger than herself. She watched as the bear finished its meal, licking its nose before lifting its gaze to hers once more. And in those dark, knowing eyes, she saw something she couldn't quite explain. Then, as if satisfied, the bear turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Caitlin stayed on the porch long after it was gone, her fingers still resting lightly against the wooden railing. She should have been afraid. She should have questioned what had just happened. But all she felt was an overwhelming sense of peace. The bear had come back, and she knew somehow that it would return again. That night, she left the curtains open, not as an invitation, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what had happened. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't put into words. The bear wasn't just passing through. It had chosen her, just as much as she had chosen it. She didn't know why. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew that whatever this was, it was far from over. In the distance, deep within the forest, the bear settled beneath the shelter of an old pine tree. The wind howled through the branches, snow drifting softly onto its thick fur. Its eyes closed, its body relaxed, but its mind remained aware. It had found something rare, something safe, something familiar. And as sleep took over, one thought remained: this was only the beginning. Caitlin sat by the window, staring at the snow-covered trees. She had stopped questioning why she looked for the bear. It had become a part of her routine, just like chopping wood or boiling coffee. She knew the bear would return. She didn't know when, but she felt it. There was an invisible thread between them, pulling them together in ways she couldn't explain. Every sound outside made her pulse quicken. Every shadow between the trees made her breath hitch. She was waiting, one afternoon, while picking up supplies in town. She overheard two men talking about bear sightings. They spoke in hushed voices, their words laced with concern. "Too close to homes," one muttered. "Might have to call it in." Caitlin's stomach tightened. She knew they were talking about her bear. The thought sent a sharp wave of fear through her. What if someone saw it near her cabin? What if they reported it? What if it was taken away? Or worse, trying to steady her nerves, she forced herself to focus on her errands. She paid for her supplies and walked toward her truck, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave her. She knew how people saw bears: dangerous, unpredictable. They didn't understand what she did. They didn't know the quiet way it looked at her, the gentle way it took the apple from her hand. To them, it was just another wild animal. To Caitlin, it was something more. That evening, as she was unloading her groceries, she heard the familiar sound: soft, rhythmic knocking on the window. She turned, and there it was, the bear. Relief flooded her chest, pushing away the fear she had carried all day. She set the bag down and stepped toward the door, her heart pounding. Slowly, she opened it just a crack, enough for the cold air to rush in. The bear tilted its head slightly, watching her with those deep, dark eyes. For the first time, Caitlin hesitated. The voices of the men in town echoed in her mind. She knew the rules: bears and humans weren't supposed to mix like this. If anyone found out, the bear would be in danger. And yet, as she looked at it, standing there in the moonlight, She couldn't turn it away. She didn't have the heart to break something that had come to mean so much. Taking a deep breath, she reached into her pocket, pulling out another apple. She placed it on the wooden railing and stepped back. The bear sniffed the air, then moved forward, its heavy paws pressing into the snow. It took the apple carefully, chewing in slow, deliberate bites. Caitlin watched in silence, her emotions tangled. This was dangerous. She knew that. But in that moment, watching the bear, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. As if, somehow, they understood each other. The bear finished eating, then looked at her again as if expecting something. Caitlin's throat tightened. "You can't keep coming here," she whispered. The words hurt to say. The bear didn't move. It only blinked, its ears twitching at the sound of her voice. She swallowed hard. "People are starting to notice you." The wind whistled through the trees, filling the silence between them. Caitlin felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't want to say goodbye. She didn't know if the bear understood, but it let out a low, deep breath. Then, slowly, it turned away, lumbering back into the trees. Caitlin stood there, watching until its shadow melted into the darkness. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering not from the cold, but from the sudden emptiness that settled inside her. The bear was gone, and for the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake by letting it come so close. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bear. She heard the crunch of its paws in the snow, felt the warmth of its breath through the cold air. She knew she had to make a decision. If she kept this up, the bear would lose its fear of humans. It would become comfortable around people, and that could be dangerous for both of them. But how could she turn away from something that had become such a part of her? Morning came, and with it, more doubt. Caitlin sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in her hands. She thought of her grandfather's journals, his words about nature and respect. "Bears don't need us," he had once written. "They are wild, and they must stay wild. If you truly love something, you don't try to keep it. You let it be free." The words stung, but she knew they were true. She just didn't know if she was strong enough to listen. The day passed in a haze. Caitlin tried to distract herself with chores, but nothing could shake the heaviness in her chest. The thought of never seeing the bear again felt unbearable. It had become more than just an animal to her. It was a presence, a quiet companion in a world that had felt so empty. But love, real love, wasn't about holding on. It was about knowing when to let go. And she feared that moment was coming sooner than she wanted. That evening, as she stood on the porch, staring at the forest, she made a promise to herself. If the bear returned, she wouldn't turn it away. But she wouldn't encourage it either. She wouldn't feed it, wouldn't make it dependent on her. She would simply let it exist as it was meant to free. The thought hurt, but deep down, she knew it was the only way. She could not keep it safe if she kept calling it back to her. The wind howled through the trees, cold and sharp, biting against her skin. Caitlin wrapped her coat tighter around herself, blinking against a sting in her eyes. She whispered softly, "If you come back, I hope you understand." The night offered no answer, only the whisper of the wind and the distant rustling of trees. And somewhere, hidden in the darkness, the bear waited, watching, knowing that something was about to change. Then in the late afternoon, a sound shattered the quiet. A frantic scratching at the door. Caitlin froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. This wasn't the steady, patient knock she had come to expect. This was desperate, urgent. She sprang to her feet, rushing to the door. When she cracked it open, the icy wind rushed in, along with a sight that made her heart stop. The bear stood there, breathing heavily. Blood streaked across its front paw. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. "Oh my God," she whispered. The bear swayed slightly, its massive body heaving with each breath. It was hurt, badly. Without thinking, she flung the door open wider, stepping onto the porch. The bear's dark eyes met hers, filled with something she had never seen before. Pain, vulnerability, a silent plea for help. Caitlin swallowed hard, her mind racing. She couldn't turn it away. Not now. Her instincts took over. She rushed back inside, grabbing the small first aid kit she had stashed away for emergencies. She had no idea how to treat a wild animal, but she had to try. When she returned, The bear had collapsed against the side of the cabin. Its injured paw curled beneath its body. Caitlin's heart clenched. It had come to her because it trusted her. And now, she had to prove that trust wasn't misplaced. Slowly, carefully, she approached. "I'm here," she whispered. The bear didn't move, only let out a low, weary huff. Caitlin knelt beside it, her hands shaking as she reached out. The wound was deep, a long gash, likely from a trap or sharp metal. Anger flared inside her at the thought of what might have caused it, but she pushed it aside. Right now, the only thing that mattered was helping. She pulled out antiseptic wipes, hesitating before pressing one gently against the wound. The bear flinched, a deep growl rumbling in its chest. Caitlin stilled, her breath catching. But then, slowly, the bear relaxed. It was in pain, but it wasn't fighting her. It was letting her help. Her throat tightened at the realization. She cleaned the wound as best she could, murmuring soft reassurances. "You're okay," she whispered. "I've got you." The process was slow, and every time the bear let out a soft groan, Caitlin's heart clenched. She wrapped its paw with strips of fabric, her fingers moving carefully over the thick fur. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, exhaling shakily. The bear let out a deep sigh, its body settling into the snow. Caitlin reached out, hesitating before gently placing her hand against its side. The warmth beneath her palm was steady, alive. Darkness fell around them, the sky fading into deep shades of blue and gray. Caitlin didn't move. She stayed by the bear's side, listening to its breathing, feeling the steady rise and fall of its chest. The wind howled through the trees, but she didn't feel the cold. She felt something else, something deeper, a connection that ran beyond words, beyond species. The bear had come to her, trusting that she would help. And she had ... As the hours passed, the bear's breathing grew steadier, less labored. Caitlin knew it needed rest. She also knew she couldn't leave it outside in the freezing night. She hesitated only for a moment before standing up, grabbing an old blanket from inside and laying it gently over the bear's back. It huffed softly but didn't stir. She smiled faintly, running a hand over its fur before stepping back inside the cabin. Sleep didn't come easily. She kept getting up to check the porch, making sure the bear was still there, still breathing. Each time, she felt a quiet sense of relief. She had spent so much time wondering if she should turn the bear away. But now, in its moment of need, she knew there had never been another choice. She had done what she was meant to do. She had given it the same thing it had given her a reason to trust. By dawn, the bear stirred, shifting slightly beneath the blanket. Caitlin watched from the doorway, her breath catching as it slowly rose to its feet. It tested its injured paw, placing light weight on it before lifting its head to look at her. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then, the bear let out a low, rumbling sound, something between a sigh and a thank you. Caitlin felt her chest tighten, a lump forming in her throat. The bear took a step back, then another. It was leaving. Caitlin swallowed hard, forcing herself to accept it. This was what was best. It needed to return to the wild. It belonged there. Even so, as it turned and lumbered toward the tree line, a part of her ached. Just before disappearing into the forest, the bear paused. It glanced back one last time. Caitlin felt tears prick her eyes. And then, just like that, it was gone. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where the bear had been. The silence felt heavier than before, but it wasn't lonely. She had done what was right. The bear had come to her when it needed help, and now it was strong enough to leave. That was what mattered. She exhaled slowly, wiping at her eyes before stepping back inside. The cabin felt different now, warmer, fuller, as if the air still carried the bear's presence. That day, Caitlin didn't search the tree line for movement. She didn't wait by the window. She simply sat, letting herself feel the weight of what had happened. The bear had come back when it needed her, and she had been there. That was enough. That was everything. Somewhere deep in the forest, the bear was walking again, healing, surviving. And Caitlin knew no matter where it went, no matter how much time passed, it would always be a part of her. Caitlin tried to settle back into her routine, but everything felt different. The cabin, once a place of solitude, now felt too quiet. She still woke early, still sipped her coffee by the window, still walked the snowy trails near the tree line. But the absence of the bear was a weight she hadn't expected. She told herself she had done the right thing. The bear had needed help, and she had given it. But now, every time she looked outside, she felt like something was missing. Days passed, and Caitlin forced herself not to wait for the bear's return. She reminded herself that it was healing, that it needed to stay in the wild where it belonged. But the habit was hard to break. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, she found herself stepping onto the porch, scanning the woods. It had been there so many nights before, waiting in the darkness. Now, all she saw was empty snow and silent trees. Then, one afternoon, while stacking firewood, she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, tires crunching over frozen ground. Her stomach tightened as she wiped her hands on her coat and stepped forward. A park ranger's truck pulled into the driveway, and Caitlin's pulse quickened. She hadn't told anyone about the bear. Had someone seen it? Had they come to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer? The door opened, and a woman in a ranger's uniform stepped out. Her expression was calm but unreadable. "Caitlin Clark?" she asked. Caitlin nodded, her throat dry. The woman extended a gloved hand. "I'm Ranger Elizabeth Carter. We've had reports of a black bear frequenting cabins in this area. I just wanted to check in, make sure you haven't had any problems." Caitlin swallowed hard. She forced herself to stay neutral. "A bear?" she repeated. "No, nothing serious." Ranger Carter studied her for a moment. Caitlin knew she had to be careful. If she admitted to helping the bear, they might relocate it. Or worse. "I've seen tracks," she admitted, trying to sound casual. "But it hasn't been a problem." The ranger nodded slowly. "That's good. We're monitoring the area. Bears that become too comfortable around humans, well, they don't always get a second chance." The word sent a chill through Caitlin's spine. She forced herself to nod. "I understand." The ranger gave her a polite but knowing look. "If you do see it again, don't encourage it to stay. No food, no interaction. It needs to remain wild." Caitlin's stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to tell her that this wasn't just any bear, that it wasn't dangerous, that it had trusted her. But she knew the rules, and she knew that one wrong move could cost the bear everything. As the ranger left, Caitlin stood motionless, her hands clenched into fists. The fear she had been pushing away came rushing back. She had to be careful now. If anyone else saw the bear near her cabin, its fate would be out of her hands. She knew what happened to animals that were deemed a risk. They didn't get relocated. They got put down. The thought made her sick. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. That night, Caitlin barely slept. Every sound outside made her heart race. Every gust of wind, every creak of the trees sent a fresh wave of worry through her. She couldn't stop thinking about the bear. Had it gone deeper into the forest? Or was it still lingering, waiting? She pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to clear her thoughts. She had to be strong. She had to do what was best for the bear, even if it meant letting go. The next morning, she stepped onto the porch, wrapping her coat tightly around herself. The cold stung her cheeks, but she barely noticed. She scanned the trees, knowing she shouldn't, knowing she had to break this habit. But just as she turned to go back inside, she saw it. A dark shape moving between the trees. Her breath caught. The bear had returned. It stood just beyond the clearing, watching her. Waiting. Caitlin's chest tightened. She wanted to run to it, to check its paw, to make sure it was healing. But she forced herself to stay still. The ranger's words echoed in her mind, no food, no interaction. She bit her lip, her heart pounding. The bear took a slow step forward, then stopped, tilting its head slightly. It was waiting for her to act first, to see if the door would open again. But Caitlin knew what she had to do. Tears stung her eyes as she took a slow step backward. She didn't speak. She didn't reach for an apple. She just stood there, letting the moment stretch between them. Then, as gently as she could, she turned and walked inside. She closed the door, pressing her forehead against the wood, her hands shaking. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she had to. For the bear, for its future, for its survival. Outside, the bear stood motionless for a long time. Then, slowly, it turned. Caitlin watched from the window, her chest aching as it disappeared into the trees. This time, she didn't follow its tracks. She didn't wait for another knock. She just stood there, letting the grief wash over her. She had saved the bear once, and now she had to save it again by letting it go. She whispered, "Be safe." And for the first time, she meant it. Caitlin tried to move on, but the silence felt different now. The bear had always been quiet, but its presence had filled the emptiness around her. Now, without it, the forest felt hollow. She told herself she had done the right thing. She had let it go. She had protected it. But that didn't make it easier. Every morning, she still found herself looking out the window, scanning the trees, not out of hope, but out of habit. And each time, she reminded herself that the bear was gone, days turned into weeks, and winter deepened around her. The world outside was a frozen expanse, untouched except for the occasional prints of a rabbit or deer. She kept herself busy, chopping wood, clearing snow, trying to force herself into a routine that didn't revolve around waiting. But no matter how much she tried to distract herself, the ache remained. The absence of the bear wasn't just a missing presence. It was a missing part of her. Then one crisp morning, her phone buzzed on the kitchen table. She almost didn't check it. She rarely received messages out here. But when she glanced at the screen, her breath caught. It was from Dr. Naomi Fletcher, a wildlife rehabilitation expert. Caitlin hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling slightly. The message was short, but it was enough to make her heart pound. "We're releasing the bear. If you want to watch, you can." Caitlin reread the words, her chest tightening. The bear, her bear. After all this time, it was finally being set free. She should have felt relief. She had wanted this. She had prayed for this. But instead, all she felt was fear. Was it ready? Would it survive? Would it remember her? The thought sent a sharp pain through her chest. She didn't know if she was strong enough to see it one last time. But she also knew she couldn't stay away. The next morning, she drove out to the rendezvous point, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. The winding road was blanketed in snow, the towering pines casting long shadows across the path. As she pulled into the clearing, she spotted two trucks parked nearby, one with the Wildlife Rehabilitation logo on the side. A small group of specialists stood near a large transport crate, talking in low voices. And then she saw Ranger Carter. The ranger gave her a nod, her expression unreadable. "You made it," she said. Caitlin swallowed hard, stepping out of the truck. "I had to." Her voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Fletcher approached, offering her a reassuring smile. "The bear has healed well," she said. "It's strong, alert. We're confident it will reintegrate into the wild." Caitlin nodded numbly, her eyes drifting toward the crate. She couldn't see inside, but she felt it. The bear was there, the team prepared for the release, securing the area to ensure a smooth transition. Caitlin stood at a distance, her heart hammering. She wasn't allowed to be close. It was for the best. But that didn't stop the ache from spreading through her chest. When the crate door was finally unlatched, time seemed to slow. There was a pause, a breathless silence. And then, the bear stepped forward, its massive frame illuminated by the morning light. Caitlin sucked in a sharp breath. It looked the same strong, powerful, unbroken. But there was something else. A shift. It carried itself differently now. It was no longer the wounded creature that had once knocked on her window. It was whole. It was ready. The bear lifted its head, sniffing the cold air. The forest stretched before it, endless and open. And for the first time, it was free to take it, free to disappear. The specialist stayed quiet, watching, waiting. The bear took slow, deliberate steps forward, testing the snow beneath its paws. It hesitated for only a moment before trudging further into the wild. Caitlin clenched her fists, holding back the lump in her throat. She told herself not to make a sound, not to move. But then, just before it reached a tree line, the bear did something that made her breath hitch. It stopped, and then it turned. For one long, impossible moment, their eyes met across the distance. Caitlin felt everything crash over her at once. The night spent waiting, the fear, the trust, the bond they had built in quiet moments beneath the stars. She had told herself the bear wouldn't remember her, that it couldn't. But now, looking into those dark, knowing eyes, she wasn't so sure. Maybe, just maybe, some connections were never meant to be broken. Tears burned behind her eyes. but she didn't let them fall. She didn't move. She only whispered, so softly that no one else could hear. "Goodbye," the bear huffed, exhaling a cloud of mist into the cold air. And then, without another glance, it turned and disappeared into the trees. The moment it vanished, something inside Caitlin shattered. But it wasn't sadness. It was something else. Something lighter. Something like peace. She stood there for a long time, watching the place where the bear had been. The others around her murmured in quiet voices, but she barely heard them. The bear was gone. It had returned to the life it was meant to have. And somehow, she felt like she had too. Ranger Carter stepped up beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Caitlin let out a shaky breath and nodded. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think I finally am." As she turned to leave, Caitlin didn't look back. She didn't need to. The bear would always be a part of her, just as she had been a part of its journey. And in letting it go, she had set herself free too. The drive back to the cabin felt longer than usual. The road stretched ahead, winding through the endless trees, each mile pulling her further from the moment she had just lived. Caitlin's hands tightened on the wheel, her knuckles pale against the cold. The bear was gone, truly gone. She had watched it disappear into the wild, watched it take back the life it was meant to have. And yet, she still felt its presence, lingering like a whisper in the back of her mind. Snowflakes drifted down from the sky, landing in soft patches on the windshield. The world outside was quiet, as if the forest itself had exhaled after holding its breath. Caitlin tried to match that stillness, to embrace the peace she had expected to feel. But there was an ache inside her. Not quite sadness, not quite relief. It was something in between, something she couldn't name. Letting go had never been this hard before. By the time she reached the cabin, the sky had darkened. She parked the truck and sat there for a long moment, staring at the front porch. It felt different now. It used to be the place where she had waited, where the bear had stood, where their story had unfolded in quiet, stolen moments. Now, it was just wood and nails and empty space. A deep breath shuddered through her chest. She had to remind herself that emptiness wasn't always a bad thing. Stepping inside, she was met with the familiar scent of pine and smoke. The fire had burned low in the hearth, its embers glowing softly in the dim light. She set down her keys, shrugging off her coat, her body heavier than it had been that morning. As she moved through the space, she caught glimpses of the past. The chair by the window where she had watched the snowfall, waiting for a shadow to move between the trees. She told herself not to make a sound, not to move. But then, just before it reached the tree line, the bear did something that made her breath hitch. It stopped, and then it turned. The kitchen counter where she had placed apples. Knowing the bear would come, Caitlin sat down at the table, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Everything around her was the same, but she wasn't. Something had shifted. The woman who had arrived in this cabin, broken and lost, was not the same woman sitting here now. For one long, impossible moment, their eyes met across the distance. Caitlin felt everything crash over her at once. The night spent waiting, the fear, the trust, the bond. And somehow, in the most unexpected way, she had found it in the quiet presence of a creature that wasn't meant to stay. The wind howled against the cabin walls, rattling the windows. She glanced outside, half expecting to see movement in the darkness, to hear the soft, familiar knock at the glass. But there was nothing. Only the cold night and the endless stretch of trees. The bear wasn't coming back, and that was the way it was supposed to be. Still, she whispered into the silence, "Just in case. Thank you." The words felt final, and yet, they also felt like a beginning. In the days that followed, Caitlin felt the weight in her chest begin to lift. She no longer searched for paw prints in the snow. She no longer waited by the window. Instead, she let herself live. She walked through the woods without looking over her shoulder. She chopped wood without pausing to listen for footsteps. She sat on the porch, watching the sky change colors, not because she was waiting, but because she simply wanted to be there. She found comfort in the routine of life, in the small, simple things that had once felt meaningless. She read books by the fire, cooked meals without distraction, let herself sit in the stillness without needing to fill it. The silence no longer felt suffocating. It felt like home. The bear had taught her that how to exist in the moment, how to be present, how to let go of the things that no longer served her. And now, she was finally listening. One afternoon, while sorting through her grandfather's old journals, she found an entry that stopped her cold. It was written in his careful, slanted handwriting. The ink faded with time. Sometimes when a bear crosses your path, it's not a coincidence. It's a reminder, a message from the wild. They come when we need them, and they leave when we're ready. Caitlin read the words over and over, her heart tightening. Had her grandfather known? Had he experienced something like this too? She closed the journal and stared out the window. The sky was a soft gray, the sun barely visible through the thick clouds. She thought about the bear, about its quiet presence, about the way it had looked at her one last time before leaving. Maybe her grandfather had been right. Maybe the bear had come into her life not just to heal itself, but to heal her too. And maybe, just maybe, it had known exactly when to leave. That night, Caitlin stepped onto the porch, wrapping her coat tightly around herself. The cold bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. She gazed out at the darkened forest, feeling something new settle inside her, not sadness, not longing, but peace. The bear was where it was meant to be, and so was she. She smiled softly to herself, breathing in the crisp air. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for anything. She was simply here. As she turned to go back inside, she paused, glancing over her shoulder one last time. Not because she expected to see the bear, not because she was hoping for another knock at the window, but because she wanted to remember the way the trees stood tall against the night sky, the way the stars stretched endlessly above her, the way the world kept moving, always changing, always shifting, always leading her exactly where she was meant to be. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. But this time, she didn't close herself off. She left the curtains open, letting the moonlight spill into the cabin, letting the world in, letting life in. The bear had come when she needed it. And now, it was time to move forward. Not with grief, not with emptiness, but with gratitude. Because in losing it, she had found herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. Thank you for being a part of this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the deep, unspoken connections that shape our lives. Until next time, take care and cherish the moments that truly matter.